Hello and welcome to the next episode of Accountants Becoming Tech Providers. I'm once again joined by Rob Pope of Dynamics Angels. So I will hand over to Rob now to talk to you about today's session.
So, hello everybody. My name is Robert Pope. I'm the director at Cooper Parry, but however, prior to being a director at Cooper Parry for the last 4 or 5 months, I was at Microsoft UK in the Dynamics team for about 5 years. So I'm kind of coming into this from a number of different perspectives. One is working extensively in the Microsoft and Dynamics ecosystem within the UK, but also spending a lot of time working with accountants and now arguably working with an accounting organization who has changed their business model from pure traditional accounting into IT. And obviously, when we start to look at IT, we then start to look at innovation with regards to things like AI, cognitive services, and machine learning. So what I'm going to do today on today's session is just give a bit of insight from a Microsoft perspective, certainly from the work that I was doing in my previous role, and set some guidelines and some pillars of where AI is having an impact, what it is to some extent, and maybe explaining it out a little bit more so you can understand that from an accountancy perspective, the impact that it's likely to have in the future. And also, certainly from Microsoft's perspective, how Microsoft is building and researching and delivering AI around a number of key pillars of responsibility and guidelines and fairness and security, all of which have an impact on how this technology will play out into the future. So this isn't going to be a technical presentation. I'm not going to go into the kind of nuts and bolts, the Kubernetes, and all the other bits that run alongside it. It's more just to give you an explanation as to what the basic principles are, and actually, more importantly, why this is so relevant now. Now, this presentation was recorded or is being recorded in the midst of the COVID-19, which I'm sure in future days, when we look back on this, it will be a time when we'll all remember where we were. Obviously, a lot of the research that takes place that Microsoft carry out has been massively accelerated by the global pandemic. I'll touch on that slightly, but this really is more to give you an understanding of what AI is and why it's suddenly come to the fore. And I think that's, as I said, I'm very new in kind of fundamental terms to accountancy. I've only been working for an accountancy firm for, in effect, about 4 months. One of those I've basically worked from home for the whole period. So I'm still new to this world as accountants, but also I see that this transition that's taking people from the accountancy sector and starting to build your digital transformation story to end customers, and how you're going to engage with your customers, particularly as they come out of COVID-19, when a lot of innovation will have been thought about, deliberated, and considered as organizations run their business from the kitchen table. And I think, as I said, this whole process is going to be slightly different to the normal process. It's not something where I'm going to present a roadmap or a set of solutions or services. This is more about the approach that Microsoft takes to innovation and how Microsoft looks at the major technology trends and how Microsoft research projects potentially fuel those trends and also start to get involved in the whole process of developing the technology to have a real impact on life. And this then brings me to the 3 core beliefs. Meaningful. And I think this is very much about not just innovating, not driving innovation just for innovation's sake. The whole innovation piece has to be around lasting impact. It has to be about innovation on enabling others to innovate. One of the key principles behind Microsoft is their overarching strategy to empower employees and organizations to achieve more. And it's a lot about empowerment. Microsoft has a big consideration with regards to how we help organizations achieve more. And that's a lot of the time about sharing, but it's also about applying those innovations. It's making sure that that innovation has a true impact. It's not just a siloed innovation project. It's something that's actually going to bring that to life. And thirdly, responsible. So Microsoft takes the role around responsibility incredibly serious. One of the key founding principles of Microsoft is Microsoft runs on trust. And to some extent, when we look at the whole principle of trust, is that data is the thing that fuels that innovation. and using that data responsibly, and using that data in a way of fairness with guiding principles, not just principles that Microsoft applies to, but as do other technology providers. So drilling into that a little bit more about meaningful, a lot of this is pitched or has come from the growth mindset culture that Satya has brought through into Microsoft. 27 years ago, Microsoft created Microsoft Research. It's now 8 labs worldwide, thousands of researchers. And those researchers and those labs are not built in the same way that we would do and develop our normal products. They're not hired to improve the quality of what we already have. But their innovation and their meaningful development is based around what new questions, what new answers can we find? It's innovation not in a traditional sense. And we look at those things under a number of different horizons. And the horizons that we talk about is how can we grow on a new core? How can we evolve existing products and tangible items and then think about where we can take them? But Horizon 3 is then really around how we can invest in long-term technologies, things that we don't know where we're heading with them. We're not driving to fix an existing solution. It's about understanding what's the possibilities, where can we head, and what can we deliver. And Horizon 2 is also where we're looking at incubating. So we start off with focusing on that new core, then we innovate, and then we also look into the long term, making sure that that innovation is meaningful and is going to drive an applied result. And I think that a lot of that is around learning. Is we have facilities like the garage, for example, where employees have the ability to access incredibly powerful hardware. And a lot of what we've done with regards to AI, machine learning, and that empowerment principle is to democratize the access to technology, is to give people access to technology that in principle would cost millions, if not billions of pounds to build in the first instance. But by opening it up and allowing people to use a very small part of it, but have access to that huge scale to test ideas, to run, and to, in effect, just to think outside the box. And that's something that Microsoft takes very seriously with regards how the employees within Microsoft have access to that kind of technology. We also do an awful lot of hackathons. It's a term that many of you may not be familiar with, but it's all based around the principle of sharing. And I think when you look at the accountancy sector and that shared knowledge, the principle of hackathons is something that technology providers have been doing for many years, which is really just about gathering a group of people in a room or over a Teams call and just focusing on an idea as a group of people and just using that sharing principle, allowing people to think outside the box with a group of people not necessarily from the same organization. And actually that's important in many cases that they're not, that they can come from different verticals, different sectors, from SMB, for example, or from enterprise, and use those different perspectives just to kind of think and hack and develop new ideas in a very, very rapid, very quick learning growth mindset type philosophy. I think actually when we come back to one of the founding principles of Microsoft now, the growth mindset is key to helping that innovation be applied. It's not thinking with a fixed mindset, it's thinking about how far you can take things and doing things with a very open, empowerment-based principle. When we start to look, and for those of you who aren't aware of growth mindset, it's something that I would highly recommend you look into. It's a philosophy that is used by many organizations. And interestingly, even my own 15-year-old has come back from school and has been taught about growth mindset with regards to how you can develop and how you can innovate and have a slightly different view on society and the benefit to all. And sharing and empowerment and growth mindset are key to that. We also take as I mentioned, very seriously the responsibility of the unintended outcomes, the unintended consequences of AI, the basic principles of how that can be applied, and the things that we need to consider as part of our building and use of AI. You know, is it meaningful, but also can we handle it responsibly? Do we operate with fairness? Do we operate with transparency, with accountability, with reliability and safety? And fundamentally, do we ensure the privacy and security of that data? And again, one of the key elements of the way that Microsoft delivers AI technology and invests going forwards is around security and trust, and the fact that the data is the customer's data. And I think when we talk about accountants and where accountancy has a role to play, is that the growing trend of the growing volumes of data in organizations, but also how that data is handled. The world has changed from having data on a memory stick or even going back to a disk and storing it on a server on a set of taped drives that you take home or put in the safe, but also has the onus on accountants to invest and to be the guardians of that data for the organizations that you work with, to be able to provide advice to those organizations on secure transfer of data. Emailing an Excel spreadsheet with the sales ledger of one of your customers is not what Microsoft would consider responsible. There is also a huge amount of free technology that Microsoft makes aware. The way that Microsoft helps organizations to secure that data, and the cloud now is arguably significantly more secure than any other method. In fact, when you look at one of the least secure things and the least secure platforms, it's a paper notebook. It has no security other than perhaps if your handwriting's awful. But also that responsibility flows through everything that Microsoft does from a trust perspective. Microsoft is acutely aware that it runs on trust, and the processes that are put in the background are hugely significant to ensure that trust remains, and the investment that organizations and customers have in Microsoft is given the respect and responsibility that it deserves.
If you can't see the whole picture, how can you tell what you're looking at? Microsoft Dynamics 365 helps you see the data of your entire business in one place, giving you insights powered by AI to unlock potential you never knew was there. Microsoft Dynamics 365 helps you see all of the picture so you can create your own possibilities.
Apologies for the slight segue there. That really was just to give you an idea of how AI is now being positioned into organizations. It's about possibilities. When we start to look at AI with regards to how it can impact organizations, and this is where accountants stand to benefit, but also stand to have a huge area of control over this conversation. AI allows businesses to change and refine their business processes. And I think that element of coming together that we see with technology providers and accountants, technology providers, as you can well aware, we're very good at selling to IT. We understand the technology. Where I think accountants can play a huge role is the fact that applying that technology, making it meaningful, making it deliver it responsible, is something that technology providers need the support of the accountancy sector to be able to do. Technology providers don't understand things like business process in the same way that accountants do. They don't understand the outcomes that are required by an account for accountancy, for legal and fiscal requirements to the same extent. They don't have the same sort of training. But this technology has meant that this big Venn diagram now has a huge overlap with regards how technology is going to have an impact on business process. It's not just about being slightly smarter. It's actually completely changing the way organizations can operate, the people that they need within their organizations to carry out certain tasks, but also things like the compliance and governance that they need to put in place. And if we start to look then really around this AI, why do we think this has come to the fore now? Why has it become so important in the last couple of years? And really, a lot of this is actually down to a number of key principles. As children, we've all watched films, everything from Terminator all the way back, and these naysayers with regards to what will happen with AI, how that will move forward, and how it was always in the future. And actually what we see now, and I'm going to talk through just the next few minutes, just some examples and some reasons why the pillars of AI have come to the fore now, what's had an impact, and why all of a sudden is it actually becoming a reality rather than the future. And we look at some of those innovations, and these innovations, as you can see, have all come to pass kind of in the last couple of years, particularly things like speech synthesis, the ability of a device to talk like a human, Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with things like Siri, for example, or Alexa, completely automated voice synthesis, but also, and probably one of the biggest ones, which was moving away from an environment where it was actually just converting language to text. So speech to text type functionality where you had to use very specific commands to for speech recognition and for a device to recognize and understand a control mechanism, such as to change the radio channel or call home. When you move into general language understanding with human parity, so the one at the far right of the screen, that removes that requirement to understand and to know those key statements. And actually, that fundamentally changes the whole way that AI operates. Rather than it being just recognizing a specific string, as you would do with things like speech recognition, where you have to say a specific thing using a specific speech pattern to make that happen, such as call home, for example, the language understanding principle now means that that has been removed. And that has a huge impact on how you can then interact. You don't have to understand the keywords. You don't have to understand the sentences and the mechanisms and think about, well, my card needs me to use a different speech pattern to say, navigate home to my Siri phone that says call home. But also lots of other pieces come into play here. Things like translation, the ability to very quickly translate into other languages, and also the fact that the device can start to learn, or devices learn. And all of this has come about literally in the last couple of years. And I thought it's worth just giving you a couple of examples now as we've crossed over and we now have that ability to have speech recognition at human parity. And I thought it would be fun just to kind of prove the point a little bit. So
that's that whole ours is.
So I'll replay that back a bit, but this was to give you an understanding. So if you listen to the word, and then I'm going to ask.
That's that whole ours is.
So when you hear that word, it's about understanding what that lady has just said.
That's that whole ours is.
So being able to pick up speech recognition, being able to have human language parity. To be honest, with an accented voice like that, and I'm from the north of England, personally, I even struggled myself. When we start to look at that synthesis and that way that it works and that high fidelity and being able to pick that up, this is all around neural speech pattern recognition, not just the same kind of old way of being able to pick up standardized words and recognize them because of the pattern they're falling in. It's about actually being able to do that whole recognition process on the fly, and to learn and to use things like, and to be able to recognize things like accents, for example, and different intonation that maybe different sexes or genders may use within the way that they talk about things. And a lot of that is down to deep learning. Now, the next one I'm going to do is give you an example of being able to play a sentence and work out which one's real, which one's a person, and which one with synthesized speech.
As the name suggests, the original submarines came from Yugoslavia. This is easy enough if you have an unfinished attic directly above the bathroom.
Now, to be honest, I could play those over and over again, and regardless of the quality of your internet connection, of the way that you're listening to this, I would argue you would not be able to tell the difference between either of those two sentences. And again, that's then moves into a way where you can start to replace call center agents. You can start to change the way that an organization interacts with its customers. But you can also change the way that lots of elements of that general language understanding and that parity come to play. There's a huge amount of work that you can probably imagine that's gone into the back of this. Things like the Stanford Sentiment Tree Bank, which again is starting to understand the way that pronouns are used and how that can change the whole intonation of a sentence. And actually, just to give an example of that, this general ledger, jumping into my accountancy speak already, general language understanding parity. The City Council refused the demonstrators a permit because they advocated violence. So who is they? And in this case, obviously, it's the demonstrators. But that one change of that word changes the whole process. The city centre refused the demonstrators a permit because they feared violence. Who's they in this circumstance? the city council. So you can see that just the changing around of some of those, the pronoun and the way that it's referred to and the way that they particularly has changed. The iteration within that context is something that now general language understanding has come to the fore to be able to do that and to be correct in its responses. And I think when we start to see what Microsoft's approach to all of this is, it's around democratizing AI. It's about making it available to people. You start to look at where AI is actually going to appear in real life for organizations and for people like yourselves. And it's moved from that future, something that was in Terminator and Star Wars, to something that now is going to appear on everybody's desk. Everybody, or the vast majority of you, I'm sure, use Microsoft or Office 365. Dynamics 365, as per the video played earlier, is something where we now have a huge amount of AI infused into it, which is starting to guide a user, starting to do things like read an email and help a user act on it. It's helping prevent mistakes from people doing things that they shouldn't be doing. For example, emailing to somebody a secure or confidential information, and making sure and just checking that process and acting as a guide point. And obviously in the technical background, it's a huge amount of capability to build business process within an organization and to change fundamentally how it operates. And that, I think, is where the opportunity is for the accountancy sector, is having that business understanding. And I think one of the things that Microsoft is very keen to do, and I'm going to give you some free resources now that will help you learn, is Microsoft has a free AI business school. It's something that is not particularly focused on IT experts, for want of a better word. This isn't a technical turning you into a coder. This is really about understanding where AI is going to lead you and how to also embrace that culture that AI is going to change within an organization. And actually that culture piece is a much bigger component of all of this, because it will mean change within an organization. It will mean that move into a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. You can go to the website, just search for AI Business School. I'll just play a short video just to give you a bit more background as to what's in it and what's involved.
AI Business School empowers business leaders to lead with confidence in the age of AI.
I really encourage you to be open and curious about AI, about its impacts, about its possibilities.
AI Business School is a series designed to help organizations address the opportunities and challenges when adopting AI. Featuring perspectives from industry leaders successfully embracing AI.
Start small. So think in the use cases that are most important for your organization.
Talks on AI business value and practical guides to help you define your strategy.
AI can and will substantially improve our collective efficiencies on both supply and demand planning.
Learnings and insights from leaders who are driving and fostering an AI-ready culture.
Defining the clinical and business and technical success criteria upfront is really paramount.
And an inside look at Microsoft's AI evolution.
We needed to build confidence in our leadership and our people that the adoption of these tools was going to actually make them better at their job.
And AI governance models.
How do we build and use AI systems that create a positive impact on individuals and society? These are the issues that are fundamental for organizations.
Designed to move at the speed of business, AI Business School is on demand, easy to consume, and available now. In the age of AI, how will you lead?
So as I said, free resources, an area that I would encourage you all to look at just to gather some knowledge and understanding of how AI is going to impact your customers and your own organizations, but also how you can help guide them. And I think that key principle of understanding business process and being able to make that AI conversation applied, meaningful and responsible within your organizations and within your customers leads you into a learning phase of understanding and help. And I think also when we start to look at where business applications comes into this, this is something that yet more resources are available with regards to understanding AI, but also business applications. And I would also urge you to look, there's a free book, The Future Computed, which will give you a more detailed understanding as to where AI is going to have an impact on businesses and business applications, how an organization runs its processes, And also a lot of other factors that are going to come into play in the future and as we progress, and particularly as we expect this huge upsurge in innovation and demand and change within organizations as they come out of the COVID-19 phase with new demands, new ideas, new thoughts, and new innovation, alongside a desire and a requirement to change, to adapt to what we don't really know will be as the new world. So with that, thank you very much for listening to this session. I look forward to speaking to you again in the future sessions. Details are on the screen of who we are. Thank you very much indeed. Look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.